ideas and concepts between the providers and the recipients. The content is not meant as legal advice. The use or attempted use of any idea or procedure discussed in this session as applied to the recipient's own personal transactions, cases, or controversy, or applied to other cases, may or may not result in a favorable outcome or the same outcome as discussed in this session. Each transition or transaction, case, or controversy may be different as a result of unique actions or unique statements made by the parties therein, and each different act or statement in any transaction affects or may affect whether any procedure or idea discussed in this session is relevant to your transaction or that the outcome thereof will be depicted as in this session. The discussion of ideas or procedures in this session is not exhaustive of the subject being discussed. Many ideas and concepts that can affect the outcome of any legal or commercial procedure are not discussed in this session, and the fact that you may not be aware of these issues may have an adverse effect on the outcome of your procedure. It is the responsibility of each party to understand his own transactions and to apply the appropriate and complete concepts necessary for a procedural and substantive remedy thereto. This session may be redistributed privately by any recipient to another recipient requesting them, conditioned upon the fact that this notice is provided therewith. If you have any questions, you may contact Brandon by email at harmony@creditorsincommerce.com or by telephone at 702-866-9077.
All righty.
Awesome.
No.
That was long, dude.
That's 2 minutes, 2 seconds.
I liked it, Brandon. I think it was perfect.
I thought it was great.
How many words from last week? Okay. You guys are going to want to read those documents too. Okay. How many of you have started filling out 1099 OIDs?
IRS doesn't have 07 or 06.
They're on back order. Order them. You have to wait for them. Okay, no. We're not going to do any questions about the OIDs or anything yet. Let's wait till the end. We'll start going into the OID and the 1099A, and we'll do all that near the end. And I know you guys have a lot of personal questions and whatnot on that. Today we're going to start with good old jurisdictions and how they relate. If I could fit these on here. Okay, we're going to call this one up here jurisdiction X at the top. The one in the middle, jurisdiction A. We're going to call the one in the bottom jurisdiction B. Okay, jurisdiction X is the original jurisdiction. Original. This is where the birth certificate trust is. And then jurisdiction B we'll call public. And that was created by your SS5 Social Security form. It's a different trust. So here in jurisdiction A, you have John Smith in proper English, upper and lower case. Okay? That is a corporation. It is a vessel. It is a private international vessel, but it is a vessel nonetheless evidenced by the birth certificate. Okay? Down here in jurisdiction B, we have John Smith, all capital letters. And that is a separate corporation. You were given the original corporation. When your parents filled out an application for live birth, they said, yeah, we want a vessel here for our child to do business and commerce. And then the U.S. approached you and said, hey, we got this great deal. You come join our corporation. You give us your exemption, which you have with the Treasury, and will give you all the things you need. Okay? So, and in jurisdiction X, there are no corporations. That's basically that'd be living contracts between living people. Okay? So we'll just call this living contracts in jurisdiction X. And remember we talked about the types of trusts that each one created. Remember we called this one in jurisdiction A, evidenced by the birth certificate, a foreign situs trust. Okay? And this down here in jurisdiction B, where the all capital name is, we call that Cestui trust.
Can you repeat that?
Cestui. Cestui. Okay? Up here, the law form would be private. It's private law. You can call it common law of the land, but in reality, the law is whatever the parties make it to be. So if me and Joe Blow have a contract and it has nothing to do with our corporations, we're not looking for any kind of limited liability or protections of some outside party, because when you make a contract with this entity here, guess who's always a party to the contract? The United States, the state of California, any and all municipal agencies. You're making them a third party of the contract. Who's ever heard of a marriage license? Okay, marriage license is basically a corporate, what do you call it, merger. It's a corporate merger. Basically, the husband is suing the wife to absorb her corporation into his own, and they become one corporation together. And they get, and that marriage license is the state saying, yeah, it's okay for you to do this merger. Okay? Yeah.
Technically, it's polygamy.
Okay, so you guys have heard the term strawman? I'm sure. Both of these are strawmen. Okay, they're both corporations, both in jurisdiction A and in jurisdiction B. I'm getting feedback here. So the foreign situs trust, evidenced by the birth certificate, is a straw man, but he is private. Okay? When you got into your contract and created the SS5 entity, you did it with this entity up here. They had to give you a legal identity in private in order for you to contract down here. So they had to create an international vessel in jurisdiction A. That international vessel formed a contract with the democracy, the corporate United States, and formed a Cestui trust, which is like an implied trust, through your SS5 agreement. Okay? Law forms, we set up on the top in jurisdiction X, we have private law. It's the law of the contract, whatever the parties decide. In jurisdiction A, we have admiralty. Very good. Yeah, I got students who learn. Admiralty. Admiralty equity. Okay? And jurisdiction B? Statutory. Very good. Oh, wait, did you print up the documents? Okay. Okay, he printed up the documents for the class early.
Tonight?
Yeah.
Statute.
I put them online usually a couple days before the class, so you guys can access them. Those of you on the phone, if you're on the email list, I'll send you an email to sign up for a private site where we give access to documents that we discuss and go over in each class. Okay? Everyone on the phone hear that?
Yep.
Okay. Alrighty. Let's see. Alrighty. We already went over U.S. vessel, international vessel, private law, public law, and original jurisdiction. Okay, now this trust, whenever we talk about operating in the private, this trust that's created in jurisdiction A, that's the vessel that we use to form our contracts. That's where, when you're doing private commercial processes in your administrative process, when you're acting outside the bounds of what the United States says you can do, well, then you're acting with this corporation in jurisdiction A. Okay? When you're signing a loan document or anything that has to do with the state or the United States or any other public entity, whether it's a corporation within the United States or founded upon the laws of a state or have their articles of incorporation within a state, then you're dealing with the entity in jurisdiction B. Okay? You cannot interact with anything in jurisdiction B except with your own jurisdiction B entity. Okay? So those of you who are considering dissolving your Social Security trust, good luck. Because as soon as you kill this corporation, you can't operate in the public anymore. And so unless you plan on going to move out in the middle of the desert, not drive on the public roads, not use any of the public resources, you better keep this corporation. It's going to come in handy. And when you learn how to use it and you learn how to operate as a creditor with it, you'll find that it's a huge asset, not a liability. Okay? So anything else on here I want to put in? If we were breaking down the actual citizenships, this entity in jurisdiction B with the all capital name, this would be the U.S. citizen. Okay? I'm sure you've seen, requirements like on the lottery. What are you required to be? U.S. citizen. So they're saying, to play the lottery, we don't care if you were born here. You got to be signed up on the SS5 to play the lottery. Okay? If you don't have one of these public entities, you can't play the lottery because you don't have limited liability. See, this entity here has limited liability insurance. That's really what your Social Security is. It's social insurance. In fact, in most other countries, it's called social insurance. Okay? This entity would be considered a state national. And this is the entity in jurisdiction A. Okay? So if you were born in California, you would be a California national with this, and this entity is a California national. Okay? And I think that's all I need to mention about this.
Which citizenship is jurisdiction A?
Jurisdiction A, citizenship, it's a state national. No, not necessarily. There is some ambiguity when you look at the 14th Amendment. You may be considered a citizen of the United States, but that would only be by virtue of you being a state national. Okay? So just so you don't get confused, because a citizen of the United States might not be the same thing as a U.S. citizen. Okay? But I'm not going to profess to know anything about that. I didn't set it up. This trust down here, actually I'll go over this. Actually, I think I already did. When you establish this trust, you basically co-partnered with the United States. So they became beneficiaries of this trust up here. Okay, so the trust of jurisdiction A got into a contract with the United States, created the trust in jurisdiction B. I got to turn down my levels here. I'm getting too much feedback. Let me make sure. Everyone on the phone still hear me? Can you guys hear me okay? Anyone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, just wanted to make sure. Okay. So, where was I? Okay, so when you co-partnered, you created a new trust. Okay? And they became beneficiaries on this trust, or co-beneficiaries with you on this trust. Okay, when I say you, I'm actually talking about the Jurisdiction A corporation, because you aren't on here. You are the thing that makes distinctions. These things are distinctions, so they can't be you. They're legal entities. They're not you. So you may think that this name means you, but it doesn't. You have no title in the original jurisdiction. Okay, in jurisdiction X, you have no title. No name, no title. The birth certificate created this trust here in jurisdiction A. So the original jurisdiction has no titles. Private contract, you don't need a name up there. Okay, so I think that's all we need off of this. Yeah, that'll be good. Okay, so now you guys remember the trust breakdown we did on the introduction? How many were here on the introduction? The very first night, the Sunday night meeting? Okay, so there's a lot that weren't here. Okay, so we'll do a breakdown of the trusts. So the jurisdiction A and the jurisdiction B trust that we just outlined on that chart with the law forms and the names and everything, we're going to show now how those trusts relate and who the beneficiaries, grantors, and trustees are. Yes?
It was getting a social security number, buying into that program that moved us from A to B.
Yes, the question is, well, it didn't move you from A to B. The question is, did the Social Security contract move you from A to B? Did the Social Security contract move you from A to B? No. It just created a new entity that exists only in jurisdiction B. Okay, so now those of you on the phone want to follow along, go ahead and draw a line across the middle of a piece of paper. Draw 3 boxes on top and 3 boxes below the line. Okay. The 3 boxes above the line we will call jurisdiction A. Okay, so this is that foreign situs trust, and we've basically we're illustrating the 3 positions: the grantor, the trustee, and the beneficiary. So the left top box would be the grantor of the private trust. The left or the top middle box would be the trustee of the private trust. And the top box on the right would be the beneficiary of the private trust. Now we come down here below the line, and the bottom left box would be the grantor of the public trust. The middle bottom box would be the trustee of the public trust. And the right bottom box would be the beneficiaries of the public trust. Okay. And remember, we had jurisdiction X too. And that's where real people live. Okay? So, the private trust, who is the grantor? That who puts its energy into. Okay, I don't know if in a trust, the grantor is the one who puts something into the trust and directs the trustees what to do with that property or that thing or that energy. Okay? The trustee manages it, the property or whatever has been placed into the trust, and the beneficiary gets the benefits. Okay? So, that first trust, we call it private. And the grantor, I would say, would be the man or woman.
Can we call it the living temple?
We can call it the living temple. Okay? Who is the beneficiary of the private trust?
Public.
That's what we put last time. I'm gonna rearrange this a little bit because that's maybe too general. Because it's actually a little more specific than that. And and I heard Jack Smith actually talk about this subject a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to agree with him on this, that the beneficiary of the private trust would be Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of State, Attorney General. What's special about those three positions in the United States? Well, what did they have to do? They had to expatriate. They had to expatriate to serve their roles. Okay, so they're no longer U.S. citizens. What does that mean? They're not down here, right? They can operate up here. Okay.
Where they expatriate to?
What did they expatriated to jurisdiction A? Yeah. Okay. So we'll call these. What should we call these guys?
Who were they? Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury.
Yeah.
Are you going to get the treasurer as well?
You know, actually, let's put them over here in trustee. I like them better on trustee. So we're going to put Attorney General, Secretary of State, and other party, Secretary of Treasury over here as trustee. You're also a trustee, okay? So it's got you over here. It's got the Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of State, and the Attorney General. Beneficiaries, I would say, would probably be the DTC. And the anyone ever heard of the DTC? No. Okay. Their parent company, the DTCC, is where your birth certificate goes. They have over, I think it's over $2 trillion in assets. They're probably the wealthiest company in the world, but you never heard of them. They're called the Depository Trust Company. Okay? And they basically handle all the actual security assets for this country and Canada for sure, maybe for the UK and other countries as well. Okay, so all the actual assets, like the actual paper securities like birth certificates and stuff, get held by this company. Okay, now their assets, remember how we had the double bookkeeping entries? And on the left-hand side, you had assets, and on the right-hand side, you had liabilities, right? Their asset, the liability that's created by that asset becomes an asset in the Federal Reserve. Okay? And the Federal Reserve basically works with all the banks, right? Okay? So, let's come down here. And the grantors of the public trust would be the banks through the Federal Reserve. I mean, really, all banks, U.S. corporations, are all part of the U.S. corporation and thus part of the Federal Reserve. Or actually, the Federal Reserve would be considered one of like these entities, kind of outside the box, kind of like the Treasury and the DTC. And interesting, the DTC is called the Depository Trust Company because it operates on both the private and the public side. It's not called the Depository Trust Corporation because it operates on both sides. Okay? So the grantor down here of the public trust will say is the banks. But where does the banks get all its commercial energy? From this trust up here, right? How is money created? We went over this last week. We sign it into we create it. We authorize the creation of money, right? And as such, they take that authorization and work with the Federal Reserve to create the public trust. Okay? The trustees of the public trust, government officials, agents of the government, judges, attorneys, folks like that. So I'll just put
IRS in there?
IRS is kind of a funny agency because they're working for the creditors. IRS, you know, where would the IRS fit on here? Well, they're agents of these guys up here because the reason why the Secretary of the Treasury, the Attorney General, and the Secretary of State all expatriate is because they got to be able to work for the creditors. Okay? So if they're working for the creditors and the IRS is working for the creditors, isn't really the IRS just probably underneath the Secretary of the Treasury in some way, shape, or form? So I would say they probably exist up here, but they also kind of exist down here because they're in charge of the accounting. Okay? Because down here is where all the debt exists. Okay? Up here is where the assets are. Okay? That's why everything up here is not a corporation, is not a U.S. entity, is not in jurisdiction B. Okay? Because all we deal with up here are assets. The public is bankrupt since 1933, and it can't deal in assets. It can only deal in liabilities. Okay? Yes. And who would be the beneficiary of the public trust? The people. Yep, the people. So all these corporations and banks and all these things were set up for you, for your benefit. Okay? So, we got that.
Where's the DTC, would you say is located?
DTC is on Water Street, 55 Water Street, New York City. Okay. Yeah, that pen's a lot darker, but it's a lot harder to erase, too.
Quick question.
Yeah.
There's some sprays that'll help you do that. Do you know of anyone that's actually received a copy of the birth certificate with the documents on the back?
No, you will not get it unless you go rob the DTCC. You don't want it. You want them to have it. They're holding it for your benefit. Without it being on deposit with the DTCC, you couldn't use your asset. You can't. See, we'll actually, not tonight, but later on, we'll actually get into some real creditor stuff where you guys will learn that you can actually access the asset side at DTC, pull those funds into the public or onto the asset side of a closed bank account, and you guys could write checks for up to $250,000 a piece. Okay?
Later.
But this, again, we're not going over that tonight. This is something, once we've all learned to be creditors, then we'll start getting into that. Okay? And so we're gonna take it slow. Okay? I don't want any of you using the same learning I did, which is just kind of jump in and learn by your mistakes. So those of you who have already started filling out your 1099s, perfect. You're going to be great examples for the class to learn about how to deal with frivolous filing penalties, okay? Because I know from what I listened to the audio from last week, and I left out some key things. Okay, so don't think you can listen to that audio, read those documents, unless you understand those documents, because then you're going to know what I left out.
Right, yeah.
Okay, but don't take my word for any of this. Okay, I don't have any knowledge. I don't know shit about anything. I'm acting as a prism. The light of truth shines on all of us. Okay? And in your prism, you can remove the clouds and cracks by freeing your mind and being open and just taking everything as information. Okay? It's information. It's not knowledge. Don't think you know something, because you guys have already seen my trust model change from 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
Okay? So don't think you know anything. Is it significant, these trusts? No. Well, it is significant, but knowing who goes where is something you're going to come to a conclusion of by your own understanding of, and really the best is just observing. Look at what's going on, what's being said in documents, because that's another key thing we're going to learn in here is when you get documents from the public, whether it's a court or any other public entity, the IRS, we're going to learn how to read these documents. And you'll see how they're always showing you the remedy. They're telling you how to do what you did wrong. or they're telling you what you did wrong and how to correct it. Okay? They're always trying to help you. That's what's funny. A lot of times we read into it wrong and we say, oh, they're attacking me, they're coming after me. They're fraudulent, they're criminals. They're not. Your lack of understanding of the public system does not comprise their fraud. That's not how it works. They're not committing fraud in any way, shape, or form. We don't understand how the system works, so to us, outsiders looking in, we go, well, that doesn't seem right. But as you start to uncover all these little puzzle pieces, you'll start to see, oh, actually that does make sense, that it works that way.
I just try to tell people if they do everything right, we're the ones that are doing everything wrong.
Yes, exactly. The government does it right. They're doing it right most of the time.
But if one party doesn't...
Wait till you're on the mic.
It's an interesting concept about the fraud, because I'm wondering if one party withholds information so there's not a true meeting of the minds, then that person doesn't have the necessary information to make a valid consideration of the contract. So in a sense, maybe it could be fraudulent.
Ignorance of the law is no excuse.
Right. That's one, but the contract itself, if you remain silent or acquiesce or you accept a benefit or a privilege, then you're assumed to know the contract. Just like people like to say, well, we were never told we're in Admiralty law. We weren't told that. But you're walking around with bills of exchange in your pocket, trading them for goods and services, using debt to offset debts. So as far as they're concerned, you're acting like a law merchant. If you're acting like a law merchant, you must be a law merchant. Therefore, you must know what law merchants know. But they don't have to tell you what they're doing. Because if they told you what they were doing, then you would be a lot more powerful than them. And that's not... These corporations exist to make money, to be successful. And if they told you, yeah, did you know every time you write a check, we hold it as an asset and you can claim it back? Or when you sign the promissory note for your house, we're holding it over here in an escrow account? Yeah, all you have to do is claim it back. Or they're going to hold on to it, not tell you anything, wait 3 years, claim it abandoned, and then turn it into reserves. That makes a lot more sense. Like, if you paid me with checks, and I actually just held on to the checks because I'm like, I'm going to cash this in. But I zero your account each time. But I'm holding on to these checks, holding on to these checks, holding on to these. I don't have to tell you that I'm going to take these checks and turn it into more money than you gave me. I don't have to tell you that. It's just your lack of understanding of what's going on with money. That's not my problem. So, some of the documents that you guys will see in your downloads, I'm just going to go over them real quick because we might not actually touch on all of them. But you'll see in there, actually we will go through this. Let me set this aside. Alrighty, we might not get to this tonight, so I'll mention this. There's going to be a money order in there. Okay? Do not use this document if you do not know how to use this document. Okay? It's a money order. And it is in the download. Okay? Or in the documents download. You see there's a little detached line here. You cut it there. It's got a date. It's got a pay to the order of, for the amount, a tracking number, written out amount, memo field, account number field, and a little clause here about the IRS Technical Support Division. Don't use this document. It's for learning purposes only. Okay? Don't start writing out money orders and sending them out to pay for things, because you know what? What jurisdiction is this document from? Anyone? Right. Jurisdiction A. And how do documents from jurisdiction A fare in jurisdiction B? Not very well. They don't recognize them. They look at it and they go, what the hell is this? Yeah, I ain't going to take this. But like I said, this is for you to learn from, because it can be used to perfect claims and things like that from jurisdiction A. And when we start getting into the DTC and how you're going to be accessing these funds and bringing them into the public, then knowledge of negotiable instruments will come in handy. Okay? So also you guys should all be reading the entire UCC if you haven't already. UCC is available online. It is the Uniform Commercial Code. It's basically going to, what it is since we're in a bankrupt society and all we have is debt, can you pay a debt with a debt? No. All you can do is discharge the debt, okay? So what you're doing when you're trading these things around is you're actually perfecting a security interest, okay? Because you're not actually using money, you're not trading anything of value, you're exchanging debts for debts, so it gets into securities, okay, and perfecting security interests. And the UCC has an entire title just on negotiable instruments, has an entire title on security interests, okay? So you'll start to see that a lot of the UCC is very relevant to what we're talking about. And when you understand the UCC, it's actually a very small piece of law. It's not like the U.S. Code. Okay, the U.S. Code is quite extensive, and it could take you a while to get through the U.S. Code. But the UCC is not that big. It's actually very, well, as far as I'm concerned, it's a small set of code. You can go through the entire thing within a couple days. And when you understand that that's really what overlays your entire system, when you get into warehousing law, that's all about the prisons. Okay? Because you're putting up your surety, your vessel, to be held in a warehouse by your creditor for your debts. So you'll see how to get people out of prison by just reading the UCC. Okay? That's how powerful that piece of code is, because it's a standardization of private commercial law or private international law, the law of commerce that governs transactions between nations. In order for foreigners to be able to perfect their security interests here in the United States, we had to adopt this common law form for commerce. So every state adopted the UCC. So the UCC itself is actually, you can't point to it as an authority because it has no authority. The UCC itself is just a guideline, and each state adopts it. So there's the California Commercial Code, but the California Commercial Code is the UCC put into the California Code with its own numbering system. That's it. That's all they did. So every state, in order to be in international commerce, had to adopt these laws in order to operate in commerce, okay? So, don't use the money order. There's a great document in there everybody should read. It's like 50 pages or something. Yeah, 50 pages. It's called, What Does Accepted for Value Mean? Okay? What does accepted for value mean? And it is a great document. So I would highly suggest reading through oh my gosh, it's even already got highlights in it for you. There you go. You can't beat that. I didn't highlight it though, so be careful. And you guys, a lot of the documents you get, a lot of them are off. There are elements of some of these documents that are not right. But you should be able to distinguish with the heart of a creditor what's right and what's wrong with these documents. As soon as any of these documents start talking about the fraud of the government and how we need to collapse it, and okay, that's the wrong path. Okay? And if that's your intention, I wouldn't suggest it. I mean, Iraq can't beat us. I doubt you're going to beat the United States at anything. Okay? So think about that. That's what you're doing. You're going to war with the United States. So don't go down that road. There's a lot of people out there that's their come from, is the United States is wrong, they're the bad guys, and I'm going to battle them tooth and nail in the courts, out of the courts. I'm going to write documents that attempt to put liens on judges and IRS agents. Every time you guys see a document, well, I don't know if you guys, because you guys may have not been exposed to this whole patriot movement and redemption movement and commerce yet, but as you start to get involved with these groups, you'll start to see things going around that have, oh, this stuff doesn't work, watch out, so-and-so just got arrested. And you go read what so-and-so did, and he put a lien on a couple IRS agents, he put a lien on a judge. He's going to war with the United States. Okay? Not smart. So keep that in mind. Creditors always bring a remedy. They're never going to fight about anything. You're never going to argue about anything. Whenever you're confronted with a controversy, you're going to ask questions in order to solve that controversy, to bring a remedy for that problem. That's what a creditor at heart would do. That's why I stress so much about this being a spiritual thing, that if you're not a creditor in your heart, you're not giving, you're not loving, you're not forgiving.
Is there a new form of criminal that's been created as a result of that?
Yeah, there's actually the whole commercial redemption movement mixed with the patriot movement created a new form of terrorist known as a paper terrorist. So that's how powerful some of these documents are. You're considered a terrorist if you use them. Okay? Keep that in mind. Also, you'll see in there a bond for a birth certificate. We've talked about accepting for value the birth certificate. Let's go into that a little bit. What is the birth certificate? What is a certified copy of the birth certificate that you get from the county?
It's a bond.
It's a bond. It evidences title. Anything else? We'll go with that. Okay, so it's a bond and it evidences title. Who's got the title?
State.
DTC.
Where did you get the birth certificate from? Yeah, you got it out of the county records, right? So either the county has title to the trust. Remember, it's not you. Even though your vessel is evidenced on the application. What kind of whenever you put, have anyone ever heard of a manifest? Okay, well, you manifest it into commerce. And when you manifest it into commerce, what they do? They took your measurement, they took your weight, right? They said, okay, it's a vessel of about this size, it's a vessel that weighs about this much, and it's got feet that look like this. Okay? That's the application for the certificate of live birth, okay? Or the application for live birth. So, that application created the corporation, which was now suretyed by this vessel that weighed so much and was so big. So that trust and that document of title being held at the county, let's write a birth certificate up here. Okay, so this is birth certificate. Okay, so the birth certificate, our Jurisdiction A corporation, is a document of title. It's being held in the county records. So therefore, if the county issues the certificate of title, just like the state issues your certificate of title on your car, the issuer is the one who's got legal title. Who's got equitable title? You do. Actually, until you partnered up with the United States. So as soon as you partnered up with the United States and you share equitable title in that trust. Okay? So, if I certificate this certificate, what am I doing?
Taking ownership.
Taking ownership. Interesting word. And by ownership, do you mean legal title?
Yeah. Possession. Yeah.
Well,
Possession.
not necessarily possession. Because possession just signifies equitable title. If you're in possession of something, doesn't mean you have legal title to it. Who controls it? Right? So if you accept this for value and return it through the Secretary of Treasury, who will probably take it to the DTCC, you've now said, I'm taking legal title to this trust. As legal title holder of that trust, you now are the trustee. Okay, remember, we kind of subrogated our right as trustee to the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Treasury, and the Attorney General. Okay, to protect the creditors. So, you subrogated your right to being trustee on this trust, you're taking it back. That's all you're doing when you accept it for value. And also, you'll see in the documents, there's some sample accepted for values on there. There's one that I would use for the birth certificate, and there's one that I would use on other things. It's called a banker's acceptance. What's that? They're a Word doc, so you can overlay them, or you could just take this document and print it through. A lot of people like to tilt it, so if you want to tilt it, you'll have to do that through Photoshop or something, because I don't think you can do that in Word. You can turn it on its end in Word, but I don't think you can like tilt it 15 degrees or anything. So I'll actually read these to you. This one is the banker's acceptance I would put on the birth certificate. It says accepted for value at the top, exempt from levy below that, and then it's got by, line with authorized representative under the line, date, and a line for the date. Underneath that, exemption ID number. And that looks a lot like a Social Security number with no dashes. Okay? Then below that is a deposit order. Deposit to the U.S. Treasury and charge the same to John H. Doe, 123-45-6789. What are we saying with the deposit order statement there? Deposit to the U.S. Treasury. And this is what would be on the actual birth certificate. So we're saying deposit to the U.S. Treasury. So we know it's a bond. We know it's a document of title. We're putting our banker's acceptance on it, which means I've accepted it, right? When you accept an offer, doesn't that make you the legal title holder of the offer, of the transaction? Okay, so you accepted the offer. County offered you the bond. You accepted it for value. So now you're the controller of the transaction. And then deposit to the U.S. Treasury and charge the same to. And then it's got this name in all uppercase, the U.S. vessel, with the U.S. vessel's ID number. Charge the same to. Yeah. So credit that account. Credit that account. Deposit this and credit it to my account. Okay, and this one you would just use in standard, like this would be a banker's acceptance for any other offers that you receive. Yeah, anything outside of the ordinary. Accepted for value, exempt from levy, by, which has the signature and the date are the same, and then underneath that, rather than having your deposit order, it just says paid to with a line. You write in there whoever it's paid to. So if I'm accepting for value a traffic ticket, it would be paid to the city or the municipality or the court or whoever it is. And then right here you see below that it says acquired from, John H. Doe, comma, and the exemption number ID there. Okay? Yeah. So what are you saying with that? Acquired from, and then you have the account there. Okay, so I've accepted it, so I've taken the legal title of the transaction, right? I'm saying, okay, I'm taking that. And really, if you accept it and then you return it, haven't you just turned that into the payment?
Yep.
A debt for a debt, right? In bankruptcy, they accept debt for debt. When I accepted it, I turned it into money with my signature by acceptance. Okay?
Doesn't it become a negotiable instrument at that point?
Yeah, it does. If you put a banker's acceptance on it, it becomes a negotiable instrument, especially if the offer had a dollar value to it. Yeah. Okay? So, the birth certificate, where did I put the bond? Okay.
Where do you use that acceptance number that you have on there? I mean, what do we use with these?
The question is, Question is, what is the number on the acceptance for value statement? It's your exemption ID number, which is, depending on how you write the number, it could be your social security number if you have 2 dashes in it, after the 3rd number, after the 5th number. That's the social security number. If I take the numbers out and push all the numbers together, it becomes an EIN. Okay? If I just have 3 numbers and a space, 2 numbers and a space, and 4 numbers, then it can be considered another number for another kind of transaction. Okay? So it can be used in several different ways, but it's always that number. Don't think that number is only your number. And it's not your number. Whose number is it? It's the IRS's. Or no, actually, it's probably the United States number. Maybe, but I'm thinking it's probably the United States because what created the number? The SS5. SS5 is a United States entity. Because the SS5, even though it sounds like an IRS form by its form, because what's funny is the IRS has a form just like it called an SS4, which is for getting EINs. But an SS5 is for the Social Security Administration, not the IRS. So I thought that was kind of interesting that one form is from the IRS, but the other is from the Social Security Administration. Okay, so
EIN.
EIN, Employer Identification Number. And you could also call it a TIN, Tax Identification Number. FEIN, Federal Employer Identification Number. That number goes by all 3 of those names. Okay, and also there's the ITIN, which is, I want to say, International Tax Identification Number, something like that. It's basically for foreigners. If I'm a foreigner and I register on it with a W-7, not for an EIN, but a W-7, which would give me the benefits and privileges of a U.S. citizen. I'd be using the number as a U.S. citizen does, but I'm not necessarily within this jurisdiction. Like those who try to claim themselves as non-resident aliens,
Isn't that over 9?
it always begins with a 9. Okay, so if your number doesn't begin with a 9, it's not an ITIN. Okay. Okay, actually, who wants to go over a bond? Or can we read it? Okay, we'll go through a bond. Alrighty, this bond is a birth certificate bond. This is what's going to accompany the birth certificate when it's accepted for value and goes in. Issued by John Henry Doe, upper and lower case. Who is that? That's the trust created in jurisdiction A. It is not a living man. A living man doesn't have a title in commerce. Okay? The only way you can do business in commerce is through an entity. And this was the first entity established for you. Okay? And now that you've taken control of that entity, you can use that name. You don't have to use the all uppercase name. And then it's got on there an address. This one has non-domestic without the U.S. Does anyone know what that means when you use that in postal terms? Not necessarily. If I say non-domestic without the U.S., I'm basically, there's an entity we left out of the mix when we were doing our little trust. There's one more entity that sits on the fence as far as public and private goes. And it's a post office. Post office is actually the only agency, because everyone else we named that was over in jurisdiction A, they were individuals, right? Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, and Attorney General. Those are 3 individuals. But the actual post office operates on both sides, because the post office has actually had to exist before the democracy did, because it's the post office through which international commerce happens. Okay? So the post office has the capacity to work in the republic and in the democracy. Has anyone here ever sent mail for 3 cents? Anyone here ever know you could send mail for 3 cents? Yeah. What's that? No. Just an individual. I could just write you a letter, fold it up, put it in an envelope, and send it to you for 3 cents. You know what the trick is? Non-domestic without the United States on the address. And a general delivery address as the from address. So rather than putting a residency with a zip code or anything as the from address, I would put general delivery at the post office where I'm going to be dropping it at. Okay? So it would be general delivery, this post office, non-domestic without the U.S., and then the addressee, I would put in their address, and you could throw in the non-domestic without the U.S. on there as well. Put a 3-cent stamp on it, it'll go through.
Car mailing.
Randy, you might also want to explain that that's because it was never changed from the Constitution or the post office.
Yeah.
It became a corporate structure in 1971.
Yeah, the post office was basically, if you read the Articles of Confederation and documents of that like, you'll see the English language is a funny thing because it can be used to manipulate. And we're very ignorant. Like if, how many of you have seen the movie Idiocracy? Great movie, right? That's, if the founding fathers were to travel into the future and come to our time, they'd be feeling a lot like the guy in Idiocracy felt. Because what happened with Idiocracy was, oh no, we lost people on the call. Hold on just a second. How much time are we at?
You gotta take a break in 8 or 10 minutes before.
Because I've lost a couple people on the phone.
5 minutes.
5 minutes?
You take a break now.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take a break so I can reset this and get some people on the phone. Then we'll go into the bond a little more. If we don't get to them tonight, every Tuesday I do a free conference call that anyone can call in on, and that's pretty much what we handle on the conference calls. All questions about 1099 OIDs, 1099As, yeah, it's all personal stuff. So if you guys want free personal attention, it's Tuesday nights, 7. And you may come across a piece of information that kind of blows up this thing you thought you knew over here. Don't disregard it. Don't take that as truth. Just take it in as information. Do your research. If I've got this new piece of information, how can I validate this information? Don't ever take anyone's word for anything. Don't do it because Winston said to do it. Don't do it because I said to do it. Don't do it because Jack Smith said to do it. Don't do it because anybody else but you have an understanding of doing what you're doing. Okay? Now, does anybody have any questions regarding the banking or the OIDs? Because I know there were some people who weren't here last week, but maybe they got the audio or the video.
Yeah, back on the 1099 OID, you mentioned about if someone has actually got all their checks and last week, and then you said to like test it with 2 checks to, I believe it was the Secretary of Treasury. Is that correct? Or,
Checks.
yeah, if they have their checking account and the checks are actually coming back to them opposed to not having the checks, where you would just...
Oh, you're actually getting the original checks back?
Yes. So actually, it's not me, but it's like my mom and certain other people that I know. So I'm wondering, is there a step to follow through with that? That's
you got to remember that it's actually not the check. Okay? Just like, let's take another example where the security might get returned. In the case of, geez, I guess a check is the only thing that actually makes the rounds and comes back, huh? Any other negotiable instruments? Oh, yeah, even promissory notes come back or don't come back. I would say that realistically, you know what? Look at the check. Look at the check. See what other endorsements have been added to it. And then decipher it for yourself. Because depending on what's been endorsed on there, if there's 2 bank endorsements on there, then one of those bank endorsements is probably one from your account. Okay, remember we had our ledger. Oh, and I just thought this up the other night, and I thought it was interesting. You guys remember our good old ledger here, the symbol of Christianity, the cross? You guys know that Jesus was stabbed by a spear? Okay, do you guys know which side it was on? His right side, right? Yeah, so if he were up on the cross looking at the ledger, which side would it be going into? The asset side. Isn't that interesting? Just something I came across.
So would it be interesting also to...
Yeah, but you know what? But I could totally, because then I would, if it was on the other side, I would say it was because he flipped the tables in the money changers. He was paying his debt of the material world before he left. So I could have made it work either side, but I think it's cool that it's the asset side. Okay, so.
Isn't that why the blood of Christ is said to have prepaid our debts? Because
Yes.
it's on the asset side?
Yes, it's on the asset side. So everything's prepaid now, and you live in a prepaid society. Okay, so remember we said the check goes all the way through. You write a check. It goes through to bank. I write a check to Mary. Mary takes the check and deposits it in her bank. We'll call Mary's bank Bank B. Okay? Check goes into Bank B. Bank B's reserves go up. Bank B passes it through the Federal Reserve to your bank, Bank A. Bank A holds on to the security, and it's now an asset, but not reserve funds, right? So it's sitting over here as an asset, and then with the 1099 OID, we're claiming that asset, right? We're claiming the funds for that asset. What should we file before we claim those funds? 1099A. Very good. Why would we file an A on that asset before we put it on an OID? Well, are we doing an acquisition on it, or are we claiming it abandoned?
Acquisition, but it's abandoned. Thanks.
No, it would be an abandonment. Because what is the difference? What differentiates an acquisition from an abandonment on the A? There's just one thing that changes it from an acquisition to an abandonment. The field 5, box 5 says something to the effect of, does this person have to pay it back? If you mark it yes, it's an abandonment. If you mark it no, it's an acquisition. An acquisition is a straight across purchase. They don't have to pay it back because it's a straight across transaction.
Can you say that one more time, the yes and the no part?
The yes and no. If it's, you mark yes for an abandonment, no for an acquisition. So this asset is sitting there. If you put in a 1099A abandonment on it first before you put it on an OID, it's already sitting on the books of the IRS, sitting there waiting for you to claim it. And it's already made out to the right bank. So when you go and fill out your OID of, hey, these guys withheld this amount, it's right there in the IRS's books. They don't even have to go to the bank and see it. Because they see, yep, these funds have been abandoned by the bank. You're claiming them back. They were withheld by the bank. We're sending them back.
Is it secured on it, though? Secured, abandoned, the OID?
No. The 1099A is the abandonment and acquisition. Okay? The 1099 OID is original issue discount. Okay? So, and remember, the original issue discount was the security. There was a zero issue price on the security, which has a face value of whatever. So if I wrote a check for $1,000 and it ends up back at my bank in an asset account, the issue price is zero. They paid me $0 for it, but the redemption value is $200 or $250, whatever I said the initial amount was, and that's the original issue discount.
So where's the word secured come in? It's on the 1099 form somewhere.
On,
Secured,
I don't think so.
secured acquisition or abandonment?
No, I don't think it says that on the A. I'm gonna pull my A out right now. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it doesn't say anything like that. It says acquisition or abandonment, of secured property. Okay. Yes. Yes, abandonment of secured property.
So you're securing it with the A?
No. It's already secured property. Whose name authorized the creation of funds on that document? Right.
Third party.
Yeah.
That's what we used to see. It's
Yeah. If you put your signature on it, what did you do?
secure it.
And you authorized it. You took title of it. Right? There's a lot of things that a signature signifies. Ooh, signify is an SI word. It means it's a simulation.
Quick question, since you're saying you do the 1099A to get the abandonment of the fund, so later when you do the 1099 OID, you get your funds back?
Yes.
At what point would you do the acquisition?
An acquisition, okay, when would we do an acquisition? Let's say I've been sued 5 times in my life. There's no real outstanding judgments or anything. Like, I don't owe anybody any money because of these lawsuits, but there's these lawsuits out there, okay? And if there was a lawsuit 10 years ago, can you search the docket and find that lawsuit? Even though the judgment's already been rendered, you've already paid the judgment, it's still sitting there, right? What's holding it there? Because it's an account. A court is a bank. It's still open, right? It's an open account. So what's holding it open? There's an asset. You can't hold an account open without an asset. So there's an asset sitting in that account. So if I'm going to do it, if I do an acquisition of that asset, what happens to that court case? Gone. Disappears from the ledger. Because I grabbed the asset.
If you're doing an acquisition, are you then getting, you're not OIDing it also? You're just
No.
zero.
If you're doing an acquisition, you're saying that there is no funds to come back.
Yeah.
I'm doing a straight across transaction.
So you wouldn't want to 1099A acquisition your house, then you'll never, you wouldn't get paid off.
It depends.
Okay.
What property are you listing on the A? Okay?
I'll give you the deed.
Because remember, the A has on it box number 6. Yeah. Box number 6, description of property. Okay? If I was doing it on a court case, the description of property would be, I would probably have case/account number and then put the whole case number in there.
For an acquisition.
Yes. If it was an abandonment, like on my bank, like, oh, we didn't talk about what we would list the property as for our bank account, right? The property would be the account number. Because there's no way you're going to list all the checks in there. So realistically, you list the account number. Now, remember, it's an abandonment of the funds that are being held on the asset side of that account. Okay? Over here, which, do assets show up in your balance? Okay, and did I already talk about how we'll go into actually acquiring funds from the DTC into the asset side of your account, and then you'll be able to use those funds? Okay, the public side of your balance will always show 0 on that account if you're only using the asset side. Okay, because the asset side does not reflect in the balance on the account. Okay, and that's why when the check came back and got put into the asset, they didn't put it back into your account. Because that asset's being held over here on the asset side, but it doesn't automatically create the liability side. Because it already made its rounds and came back around this way. If you endorsed a check and deposited it, it creates both entries. It creates a liability entry and it creates an asset entry. And that's why it becomes reserve funds for the bank that they can loan from.
And that's what you're reclaiming as OID.
No, you're reclaiming the checks you write.
Oh, that's deposit.
Okay? You can do the deposits, but that's a different process than what we've been talking about. And the technology microphone might be handled differently. So,
You're
again,
saying Jesus is actually coming back.
No. Here, actually, let me tell you this. If you're waiting for salvation or a Savior outside of yourself, is that being a creditor or a debtor? Okay? Salvation and your Savior exists within you. Okay? He never left.
Never left, exactly.
Go ahead.
In the case of a closed bank account, where a person closed it, and it already had passed closed, and you're saying that there's possibly these funds there, and would you still be able to 1099 that in this case of a closed.
So, okay, when you open a bank account, there's an asset over here for like 250 grand. They don't tell you about, okay? FDIC insurance, okay? So, I wouldn't start claiming that.
Well, I didn't mean...
Not a good idea. Not until you start dealing with the DTC. Once you've established a relationship with the DTC and they're like, okay, yeah, you can use the asset side, then you can start using the asset side of this account. But don't just start claiming funds because you don't know what's there. You don't have evidence of it. If you don't have evidence of it, how do you support it? How do you back it up? If the IRS shows up and says, where did this 250 grand come from? Oh, it came from an asset account. Really? We don't know what you're talking about. Can the public, jurisdiction B, acknowledge these assets? No. For one, it's Disneyland, right? It's completely fiction, but they're in bankruptcy. All they can see are liabilities. Okay? That's what money is in jurisdiction B, is liabilities. That's why they had to get this special company, which is outside of B, to handle the assets. Because they can't handle the assets. They're not allowed to. They're restricted. They're in receivership. Anyone ever been through bankruptcy? What happened to your assets? Well, if you have debts, what happens? If you have really big debt, if you have more debts than assets, what happens to your assets? They're gone, right?
Hey, Brandon, what's the multiple, do you think, between the asset side from the DTC to the overall debt side?
What's the multiple from the asset side? Are you talking about fractionalization?
Yeah.
Everything gets fractionalized at least 10 times.
That's probably, so we're looking from, what,
There's realistically, there's probably $35 billion in the DTC just for you. Okay, because they, basically, each time you get a Social Security card printed, okay, does anyone know the limit on Social Security cards you can request in a lifetime? 10. Fractionalization. And each time you get a new one, the bond number on the back of the card is different. It's 10 bonds. And to request 3 of them, or you can only request 3 of them a year, so how long would it take you to get 10 of them?
3 years.
3.5 years. The bond number, not the Social Security number. There's a red number on the back. Yeah, there's a red number on the back of your Social Security card. That's a bond number. That's related to the bond. Remember we were talking about how the Federal Reserve has an asset that's over here from the DTC? It's those bonds. Each one is $3.5 billion. Okay? And then they fractionalize those. Okay? But they're fractionalizing your initial deposit. What was your initial deposit? Birth certificate. Birth certificate. Yeah, oh, you mean the amount? Probably more. It was probably more. If they fractionalize it to 35 billion, it's probably a little more.
And so going back to the 1099 OID, you said to send in the 1099A first.
Yes.
Now, so let's say I send in the 1099A for 2005, 6, 7, and 8. How long do I wait before I send in the 1099 OID? Is there like a couple days, a week?
You don't have to wait that long because it depends. If you do it electronically, 72 hours. Okay, I'm going to be applying for my electronic one, by the way. If you're doing it electronically, 72 hours. If you're doing it by mail, I don't know that the OID, it matters so much with the OIDs and the A's. See, the A's are a ledgering report. Okay, so they get ledgered right away by the IRS. Okay, however, an OID has no meaning until there's a 1040. Okay, so realistically, they could probably be a couple days apart, but you got to wait a couple weeks before you put that 1040 in. I would say 3. I would wait 3 weeks before putting in your 1040. Okay?
So I have a question about the 1099 again. I'll just use a specific example. So I have a house, and I actually wanted to file a 1099A just to zero that account. So that would be abandonment, is that correct? Or that's
You want
that's
to
actually
zero the account.
No, that's acquisition.
You want to do an acquisition.
That's the acquisition.
To
So I would
take the account out.
That would be putting the property address in the Bank 6?
What are you acquiring?
The account, like the account? So like the loan number, the note number?
The promissory note, right?
Okay. But if I wanted to get 1099 OID, then the mortgage company, I would do an abandonment and then do the 1099 and get the note amount back. Is that correct?
Yes. Be
Okay.
careful with that, though, okay?
I mean, to pay off the loan or whatever.
Right. But because if you do an acquisition, the loan is paid.
That's right.
You see
That's
what I'm saying? So it's like there's no
Well,
reason to do both.
No, that's what I'm saying. I could do one or the other.
Right,
I'm not
do
saying
one or
both.
the
I'm
other,
saying
right.
if I did an abandonment, then I would 1099 OID that escrow account and get the money back.
Right.
The acquisition just zeros it.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. What's that? Yes, the deadline for 1099s to get processed is February 20th. Wait, microphone.
What does that mean?
That was my question. The upcoming tax period we're in, timeline for...
Now I don't want everybody to panic and think, oh my God, I only got 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever it is. There is still a way to get your stuff processed, okay? You just got to learn how the system works, okay? Don't be panicked. Don't go rushing. Like I said, unless you want to be the examples of how to handle frivolous filings, which is fine. There's no problem with that. We'll deal with that in here because I'm sure some of you are going to get them, okay? And when you do, we'll handle them in here and we'll discuss them. At least one, because they hear something from somebody, they start sending in Form 56s and all kinds of different things, and they start getting themselves in trouble.
So for the difference between acquisition and abandonment on box 5 on 1099A, which one do you put for which?
Yes is abandonment,
Yes.
No is acquisition. Oh, wow. I really killed the... Oh, okay. All right. Anyone else? Microphone? Microphone? Garrett, can you handle the microphone, please? Back there.
The information that you said you found out today, what was it?
That was the abandonment. Doing the abandonment before the OID, because it puts it on the books as this asset has been abandoned. It's not a necessity, but it's ironclad. Yeah, it's like making the transaction ironclad. It's to make it balance perfectly for the IRS. If everything balances perfectly on their books, there's no reason for them to come talk to you.
So if you have a property that foreclosed and a bank sends you a 1099A of abandonment, marks yes on the box,
Right?
is there any recourse?
Correct it.
I correct it and send it back to them?
If you guys notice on the 1099As and the 1099 OIDs, am I going through this down here? Yeah. There's a corrected box. So his question was, the bank sent me an A, and they told you were the borrower, huh? How dare them? Liars. Who's the actual borrower? The bank. So he needs to correct that. They marked it corrected? You know why? You know why? I bet you, did you get it sometime between March 1st and November 1st? Oh, really?
Yeah, right there.
What's the date on it?
Well, right here it says the date of 10/10/08.
10/10. Do you guys just hear the date range I gave? March 1st to November 1st. And it happened on October 10th. Remember I told you don't panic? There's a way to get it processed. The bank just told you how to do it. If you file between March and November, you mark it corrected and it gets processed. Ah. See? The bank just gave you a clue of how they're doing stuff. So that's That right there is a remedy for not getting in on time. You don't get it in by March 1st, mark it corrected and it'll get processed.
What would you do with void?
Void, you only mark the void if the actual form that you're sending in was screwed up. Like, let's say you're using a typewriter when you're filling out the form, and you're like, oh, I messed up. Then you would go up and mark void. A void does not affect something that's already been filed. A corrected affects something that's already been filed. Okay? So don't think that you fill it out, mark void, and it's going to void something else. You just voided what you filled out.
What happens if you send a 1099 OID in that was that you shouldn't have sent in for a let's say a bank, and you shouldn't have sent that 1099 in, and you're thinking, okay, I've got that out there now. Now what do I do?
Correct it, and you mark the amounts to 0. Mark everything else the same. Same payer, same recipient, same tax IDs, same description, same account number, but mark the amounts 0. If you mark a corrected 1099 with the amount 0, you've basically erased that other 1099.
Then you have to redo another one.
Yeah,
Yes.
but then if you're doing, so you want to send all those first before you send in anything else.
Hold it.
Did nobody hear that?
Don't mess with the microphone.
So you would send those, obviously, maybe.
Hold it higher on the thing, not down low. There you go.
So you would send those first, maybe a week or two at least before sending. If you zero out the ones that shouldn't have been out there, and then you send in corrected forms, right?
Oh, yeah. Evidently, don't hold the bottom of the microphone. Hello, hello. Am I still on? Yes. Okay. I gotta stop messing with this.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm going to digress for a moment because I'm a little behind with the classes and information.
That's fine.
In order to do the processes that you're all talking about right now, do I have to do the accepted for value with my birth certificate first?
Which processes? Just the
The
1099
1099As, the 1099 OIDs. Do I have to do the birth certificate process first?
No. But you make a mistake and you get a frivolous filing for $10,000, you're going to wish you had.
So the right thing to do is to do it first.
Yeah, it's a good idea, and there's no harm in it. Yeah, you're establishing yourself as a creditor. I'm in control of this trust so that if anything happens, I can use the asset side. Remember we were talking about those asset sides and those asset funds and those money orders? Well, guess what? The IRS is one of the few who will process those money orders.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, the victorious go to battle before they ever go to war. Which means that you set everything up first before you ever go to war.
I always say that about court cases. Never go into a court case without already having your judgment, without already having an agreement.
Be careful, don't hold the bottom of the
Down there. You were talking about when you do an acceptance for value, someone sends you an offer, you then become in control of the offer by accepting the value, monetizing it as a negotiable instrument. Therefore, if you get, let's say, an offer from the IRS saying you owe $10,000, wouldn't you just assume position as creditor, accept it for value, and send it back to them?
You could, but remember, accepted for value, is that a form of money in jurisdiction A or jurisdiction B? It
would be A.
A. It's a form of money in jurisdiction A. Okay? And where is the payment going? Probably. Now, the IRS does have two sides. Because how many of you know about the whole red ink thing? And it's funny that we use red ink all day today. Everything in red is what? Private. Okay? Everything in red is on the private side. What color are the 1099 OIDs and 1099As that go to the IRS? They're red.
Blood redemption.
So it's private. That form is private. What about copy B? Public. Copy C. Public. On the